Hi, guys. I'm going to give everybody time to come in. Today, we're going to be talking about if your claim has been remanded, what do you do now? So I'll give people a couple of minutes to come in, and we're going to talk about the process when your claim is usually denied, and then it gets sent up to the Board of Veterans Appeals if you appeal it, and then what happens when the board makes a decision to remand it. So we're going to talk about that, what it means for your claim, and what it means, whether it's a good thing, a bad thing, indifferent. We'll talk about all that stuff because sometimes veterans are not clear. So, and if you have any comments, make sure you put them in the comment section below, and I'll read them off, and they might be of benefit to someone else. So go ahead and ask away in a second. I'll give people a couple more minutes, and then we'll get right into what happens when your claim is remanded. And who do we have today here? I want to give you a shout out. So comment in your comment box so I can shout you out. We did this last week and we had quite a few. I try to get a better internet reception and I try to do a streaming service. So hopefully we don't have any technical difficulties today when we do the live stream. I know there were a few people who didn't get their questions answered last week, and I'll allow time, even if it is perhaps not directly on the subject, but we're going to try to talk about board remands to start out with, and then we'll jump into other stuff afterwards. We have time. So put all your comments and I'll try to get to all of them within this live session today. So I want to hear from you. And if I have some subscribers here, let me know you're here so that I can give you a shout out. Shout out for coming through to the live today. We appreciate our viewers, and we're going to do a video soon. Tracy's doing a live on Saturday. If you have questions about COVID and paid time off as it relates to COVID, Tracy's going to be doing a live on Saturday. I think that's already being advertised for the channel. And we have some other things coming up this week. So this next week, we're going to try to give you some content every day of the week to see what our viewers are most interested in. And we'll go from there. We're almost reaching our 1 year of the channel. So we thank all of our subscribers who have been here from the beginning, and the newer ones, since we just recently started doing veterans topics, the newer subscribers that came here because they're veterans and they have questions. We're grateful for all the subscribers, and hopefully we're giving you some helpful information that can help you in your everyday life. So let us know if there's any topics that you're like, you guys should do a video on this topic. Let us know about that too. And we'll try to fit it in as we can. And I'll give one more minute, and then I'll just start talking about the board remands. And then if anyone has any specific questions, you can put them in the comment section in 1 second. So I'll give 1 more minute, and then we'll go ahead and just dive into board remands and what that means for your claim, which some of those claims have been in the system quite a bit. So what does it mean when the board remands your claim? Sometimes I know to receive a note in and say like, okay, it's not anything final yet. What does that mean for me? All right. Okay, let's get started. People, I guess, will trickle in. So I'm going to start out with how what we call the former version of how we used to do things, the legacy claims, and then now we have AMA claims, Appeals Modernization Act, where claims are moving through the process a little faster. And we're going to talk about remands for both. AMA claims, the remands are very specific because that's what the AMA is designed for, to move things quickly through the line. And there's limited reasons why claims to be remanded. So let's start out with the older claims, the legacy claims, where if you're a veteran, you submitted a claim to the regional office probably may have granted your claim and you didn't like the assigned rating, or they denied your claim. What you do as a veteran, if you don't agree with it, you submit a notice of disagreement within a year of the rating decision. And then the RO has a chance to say, well, let's go ahead and look at this again, and issues a statement of the case, an SOC. If you're still not satisfied after the SOC, you have a certain period of time, I believe it's 60 days within the issuance of the SOC, to submit VA Form 9 saying, I want to appeal this to the Board of Veterans Appeals. I want someone else to look at it higher above the regional office. And when it gets to the board, depending on if you ask for a hearing or not, if you don't ask for a hearing, it moves the process along more quickly. So if you don't ask for a hearing, it ends up at the board. And the board looks at everything as a first case scenario. Like, they don't take their RO's word for anything. They look at the case and decide whether the case should have been granted, does it need more development, or should have been denied. And those are your three options. So what we're going to talk about today is if the board decides that it needs to be remanded because it needs additional development. So they don't have enough information to grant it. They don't have enough information to deny it. They need to develop it more. So I would say, as a veteran, you should take that as a plus sign, in the sense that the board hasn't denied it. Now, it hasn't granted it either, but it's a plus in the sense that they want to develop the case a little bit further. And that will give you opportunity sometimes they give you opportunity to submit new information that can help paint the picture a little better for the board. And then sometimes it's to have the RO get some records that were missing. The board said, well, we can't do anything until we get some missing records, whether it be the VA treatment records, whether they be service treatment records, service personnel records. It gives the opportunity for the file to be developed more. Sometimes the RO is supposed to do that along the way, but the RO is overwhelmed with claims, and sometimes things might slip through the cracks and they didn't realize, oh, we didn't have this information. The veteran may have said something on the VA-9 about, oh, I got private treatment records and we haven't requested the private treatment records. The RO says, okay, they missed that. The board will now actually remand to get those records so that we can have a full record. What happens is, as I mentioned before, so you can end up at the board if your claim was granted. Let's say you were granted for service connection or an increased rating, but it's not the rating that you want. So sometimes the board may remand it for, if it's evidence that your disability has increased in severity. Therefore, the board wants to know what is the current severity of your disability, and it will remand the matter back to the RO for a VA examination. And so at that point, I did a recent short video about VA examinations, how they were put on pause, but the VA is rescheduling them now. So if you got notice about a VA examination, go ahead and report for the examination, especially if it's for a board remand. What usually it takes preferential treatment for things that have been remanded, because it's understood that this person has been in line for their claim. Anything that's remanded from the board is supposed to be put at the front of the line of another line to say that, hey, this needs to be addressed immediately because this person is already waiting. We just need to know, maybe as an answer to the question about whether the disability is related to service, or maybe what's the current severity of the disability. Sometimes we have cases where it's not the veteran actually making the claim, but their surviving spouse or dependents, and they need to have a medical opinion. So it may not be for actual physical exam, but a medical opinion from a doctor. Doctor, can you tell the board what is the likelihood of this disability being related to service, with the veteran being deceased? So there's a variety of reasons why a claim could be remanded to the board, and from the board, and it just depends. But I think, and what happens is, when something is remanded, it is not a final decision. It'll come back after all the development is done. It'll come back to the board, and the board will make its decision whether they're going to grant or deny. And then after it does that, if you deny it, you have opportunity to appeals to the United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. if you're not satisfied with what the board decision was. But other than that, the board's decision is usually what's in place. So I would say that if your claim is being further developed, then that's almost a good sign to you that it may give you another opportunity to submit favorable evidence that may end up with your claim being granted. That's not always the case, but think of it as another bite at the apple that you may not have received the first go around, and this is kind of giving you an opportunity to fix some things that were not in place. And sometimes even with, let's say when I mentioned before, this is all still on the legacy track when your claims are not on the AMA track. Let's say you asked for a hearing, and at the hearing, some new information was brought up, information that the veteran may not have talked to or communicated to the RO about. In that case, the board usually, when they issue their decision, they'll say, these issues were brought up at the board hearing, we need to further develop it. So keep in mind that it might not have been the RO's fault that the veteran didn't communicate this information, but now that the board knows about it, then the board has to do further development on an issue that the RO may not have even known about. So I wouldn't say blame the RO. This is because the RO didn't do their job. That's not always the case. It could be new information that the board received by the time it got to the board. It's an open record, basically, under the legacy track. It's an open record until it hits the board and you have certain times to submit new information. So if new information is constantly being submitted to the record, it's likely that there may need to be further development based off of new information that was submitted. Remember, this is all under the legacy track. So I'm going to step briefly over to the AMA track where it's a lot more limited. The board, what happens with the AMA track is that it's assumed that the veteran has submitted everything that they were supposed to submit and it should be approved. And the veteran is now appealing it to the board because they feel like the RO incorrectly decided their case. In instances where there's no supplemental claims, it's just coming straight from the RO denied it and they appealed it to the board can only remand for a limited amount of reasons under AMA. So they can't do their own, oh, the RO should have ordered this, or maybe they should have done this. I would have done this differently from the RO, which is what happens under the legacy track. Under the AMA track, basically the board is kind of tied to say whether there's any due process violations. If there was a V exam ordered and the exam was inadequate, then they would have to remand to have another examination or an addendum opinion, ordered to clarify a diagnosis or an opinion. So it has to be some deficiency in something that was already done. So let's say the veteran said, oh, I had private treatment and they were supposed to request the private treatment records. That would be a deficiency in something specific that the RO was supposed to do and didn't do before it got to the board. Under the AMA, it can remand for those records. So it has to be blatant things that the RO didn't do that would be a violation of the veteran's due process that the board can remand. And like I said, the idea is that the board, under that system, it's almost assuming that like, I need the board to just decide something that should have already been decided and there's really nothing else to talk about, versus under the legacy, it allows the board to kind of look at things with a fresh eye and give a whole different interpretation of the electronic claims folder. Whereas the AMA is like, this is what it is. It's a closed universe almost. And you can add to it if there's some deficiencies, but it's not an open record where you can submit up until the day that the board issues a decision. It's a closed record for the most part, unless there's some deficiency that the board, as a board and the VA has to correct. Then you can say, okay, I can submit some new information. There's benefits to both legacy and AMA. I would say if you're gun-ho, like this, there's no way anybody else can see anything different about granting this claim, and I have all my ducks checked in a row, then AMA may be the fastest route to getting your claim resolved. And I think they have an estimated time frame about a year from start to finish that you can get a decision from the board. Whereas the legacy claims will take longer because, as I mentioned before, the board is doing a first a first glance at whatever is happening and doing its own development, whether they are the same development as the RO did or whether they feel like further development is needed. Those claims seem to languish a little longer because there's further information that needs to be obtained, and it may not be the VA's fault. They may be waiting for some private medical providers to submit information. It depends on all that. So keep that in mind. If you have any questions, I'm kind of going through the process, but if you have any questions, comment below, and we'll go ahead and go over your questions. But I'm trying to just get you in the habit of realizing kind of the process, because I think some people feel like, what's the point? And there is a point to it. And that's why I kind of encourage you to have a veteran service officer or someone to assist you in the process so that you can submit everything on the front end so that there's not too much development needed on the back end and you can get your decision faster. Whether it's going to be a positive or negative decision, I can't promise you that, but it'll get you to the decision faster. And then you can either appeal it to the United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, or you'll be happy that you got a grant finally on your claim and now the RO can issue you your check. So it just depends on whether your claim is actually one that is deserving to be granted. So let me know kind of what you guys think. Has your claim been remanded? What process are you at right now in the claims process? Some of you may have been just submitted your claim and you're trying to figure out kind of what's going on. You haven't been denied yet. Sometimes you can, even if it's at the submission state with the RO, you can still submit information before the RO submits their rating decision. And if you do it during the period of time frame of them submitting, they've already issued a rating decision, but you want before they issue, you submit a notice of disagreement, and before they issue the SOC, they'll include any new information that you submit. If you watch my other live or another video, I can't remember which one I did, but I would encourage veterans, when you submit information, to actually write your information, because some veterans' handwriting is not the best. And if you want it to actually be utilized, you don't want the person who's reading it to say, hey, this handwriting was illegible and I can't really tell what it's supposed to say. And it might be something like, this is the smoking gun, this is what's going to win the case. But for the sake that you don't have great handwriting, the person who's reviewing the case will overlook it and say, well, it was illegible and I couldn't see it. So I always encourage veterans to submit, any additional statements that they're doing, typewritten, maybe ask someone, maybe use the library if it's available to you. Whatever it is, try to get that information submitted so that it's actually legible. I think I said it in my VA exam short video, but keep that in mind so that it can help you, because you know, everybody doesn't have the best handwriting and you don't want that to work against you. They don't have to ask you for clarification. They have a lot of cases at the RO. So you want to make sure that they read it. You don't have to write them a book because you want them to actually read the whole thing. Try to be as succinct as possible about what you want to say and how you perhaps, if it was no disagreement, this is why you disagree because of these reasons. Try to look at the rating decision that they issued, because they'll tell you why they denied it in the rating decision. And you want to kind of rebut whatever they're saying. If they're saying you don't have a current disability, but you have a medical document that shows you have a current disability, then submit that and have a statement that says, I've submitted evidence, and see the attached. I think there's actually a checkbox on the notice of disagreement form that says, if you have anything attached to this, yes, and then you would submit evidence of whatever kind of rebuts whatever's in the rating decision. But kind of keep that in mind. This is all a claims process, and you want to make sure you are addressing the issues that the RO says was deficient in the beginning. So keep that in mind. Do we have anybody on here that actually is in the remand status and kind of wants to know what to do now, or what's going on with their remand from the board? I know too, depending on if your remand has been rerouted to different areas. So if it's something that the local VA can deal with and they don't have to send it all the way back to the regional office, they'll develop it at the Appeals Management Center, AMC. If they have to send it back to the RO, they'll send it back to the RO because the RO may have access to the documents, and the AMC, which is located in DC, may not have access to it. So depending on your particular case is where your case will be routed to afterwards. And nowadays, your file is electronic. It's not a paper file, so it's an electronic file, and you're trying to just figure out what do you mean routed, but just electronically routed to these different locations so that it ends up in the queue of whoever is supposed to be working the case to develop it and then send it back to the board. When I'll talk a little bit about when the case is sent. Let's say your case is denied by the board and you appeal it to the United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. The court can also remand it back to the board, and usually they'll say what they want you to do at the board, or they may say something else needs to be developed. So remands don't just happen from the board to the RO; they also happen from the court to the board. And sometimes there might be a joint motion for remand, meaning both sides, the veteran who was appealed, who's now the appellate, and the Secretary of VA represents VA, they agree that something the board didn't address and it needs to be sent back for perhaps the board to clarify. Or yes, the board shouldn't have relied on this opinion. It was inadequate. So they send it back to the board so the board can actually remand it back to get a better opinion. So the remand process happens at a couple of levels, and primarily it'll deal with the board level, but they're also, like I said, if you've appealed it to the board from the board opinion, then you'll deal with it from the court level. Sometimes the court will say, it's from a joint motion for remand, whereas the parties agree there was something wrong. Sometimes the court will issue a memorandum decision, usually by a single judge saying like, okay, something didn't work out with the board, send it back. Sometimes there'll be a panel decision and it won't even be a remand. They'll just make a decision like the board did it wrong. This is how it should have been done. The veteran wins, the veteran still loses, even though the board did this wrong. So it's a numerous amount of reasons. There are attorneys that usually represent the veterans at that level. Sometimes they can be helpful in the fact that you don't know what to say at that level to the court. So the attorneys can be helpful in that respect. And then you'll find out whether like they sent it back, but I still don't win. So you have to be careful about those kind of things, whether it's worth it to appeal. Maybe the board didn't address one piece of evidence, but the evidence wasn't relevant. So the result is still the same. And I know sometimes people are very passionate about things and they want to make sure it's for principle's sake. So they want to kind of make a big deal about, no, they need to address this. And then what happens, sometimes the board will address it and they'll say you still, the claim is still denied. So I usually say have somebody help you out just to make it, because sometimes the process is not as straightforward as it could be. So having somebody kind of break it down to you and say, okay, taking the I guess, emotion out of it. This is what they required. This is what you had as far as evidence. You were short on these things. And then you're like, oh, no, I have that. And then perhaps you can win. Or you're like, no, I don't have that. And like the likelihood of you winning on appeal is low. I would say, it's not worth your time to kind of take it to that level. So it's just a matter of whether you think is something that is worth pursuing. And sometimes, it's just a matter of lacking evidence, and the VA is bound by, it has to have supporting evidence. They don't do anything based off of, okay, I would just feel sorry or anything of that nature. It's based on evidence. So you have to give them something to work with, and what you want to make sure you give them everything they can have to work with. So I'm going to see about wrapping this up soon, but I want to make sure I give time for anyone who has any questions about the process. Even if I said before, last week we had some technical difficulties. So if you joined last week and I wasn't able to get to your question because of the technical difficulties, I'm leaving space for people to ask questions that are not related to board remands or just the remand process, because I know that was my fault, technical difficulties on my end that didn't allow you to have an opportunity to talk. So if you have any questions, put them in the comment section and I'll try to get to them. I'm going to give them about 5 more minutes before we wrap up today. Before we wrap up today's live session. And hopefully you're having a good Tuesday. I think today was a beautiful day. We're out here in Houston, so I don't know where you're located, but we had a beautiful day, and I think we're gonna have a rest of the week is gonna be pretty nice weather as well. So let me know what you guys are thinking. And any topic that you would like to see, even if it's not, we don't have time for the even live. If you have a comment about a topic you think we should discuss, we can do a video about that, and then we can just post the video. It won't be as a live. So put that in the comment section below so that you give some ideas. So we work on basically what you guys come up with. We come up with our own content, but the channel is for our viewers. So if you have anything that you want to see in the future, go ahead and comment below. Hi, LJ, Lenny. Let's see. All right, we have a question. How do you know if you're really safe when you are 100 permanent and total PNT? Were you here last week? There's no guarantees, Lenny, when you're gonna be safe. But I would say that usually most of the people are like, I don't know if you were here last time, but most people are safe unless usually you request an increased rating, and then it kind of triggers them to reevaluate you, and then they're like, oh, you don't really have whatever it may be. But it's usually pretty difficult to get permanent and total, so they make the process, as stringent as possible to ensure that they don't have to revisit it again, unless there's kind of blatant evidence that you're kind of fraudulent or defrauding the system, where they usually try. But I have seen people who have been reevaluated. So it's not impossible, but I would say it's pretty safe. And thank you for your service, LJ Lenny, and for your support of the channel. Any other questions from our viewers before we sign off for the day? And LJ Lenny, are you a subscriber? Are you one of our newer subscribers to our channel? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up, and this live will be available even after we end the live. So if you didn't have a chance to ask questions or you missed the first go round, it's available on replay on our channel. Go ahead and subscribe to it, and comment any other questions that I may not have covered today. So thanks for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the weather and the rest of this evening.